Okay, good evening. This is the information session for the affordable units at Modera, Marshfield. My name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. We are the affordable housing consultant who's working on this project and who will be assisting applicants through the application process and doing the marketing, running the lottery, holding this information session. Before I get started, just want to let everyone know, in case you missed it, we will be. Susan on the call. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I can hear that you're doing it on the phone and the YouTube. Can you maybe choose one or mute it when you're not speaking? Because I'm hearing myself like a second after I'm saying something. Thank you. Sorry about that. So we're doing this via conference call and via YouTube live stream. Can the folks who are on the YouTube, can you just type to the right where you see me and confirm that you can hear me before I get started? I'll just ask the question. Just wait for a response to make sure there's no issue there. Just waiting for someone to respond. If you can just type in that box to make sure to confirm that you can hear me. I just don't want to get started if there's any issue with the audio. Valerie, great, thanks. Okay, so again, David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. This is the information session for the affordable units at Modera, Marshfield. This information session is for your benefit. So please feel free to reach out, to stop me at any time if you have a question. If it makes sense to address it right then and there, I will. If it seems like it's something that I'm going to touch on during my presentation, I might ask you to hold off and I'll get to it at a time where maybe it makes more sense. Mostly, I just want to go through the kind of salient points of what to expect in the application process and the lottery and what this opportunity is. If you've never applied for this type of affordable housing, we could probably talk all night about this program and the application, but we will not. We will limit it to what I think are kind of the biggest, most salient points, and that's also, you will have an opportunity to engage with us during the process if you haven't submitted an application, if you have questions. So this is by no means your only opportunity. Our information is on the first page of the application. You can call us, you can email us if you're having trouble with something. We are available to help you through this process. Also, I should say, if you haven't submitted an application or haven't gotten the materials yet, we can send them to you. We can email them to you. They are available on our website. You can just Google us, SEB Housing, and then when you navigate to our page, there is a rental listing section. So you just click on that, go to Modera Marshfield, and you will find the information packet and the application. You can download it right there straight onto your computer if you don't have it already. Probably, honestly, the most important takeaway that you can have from this evening is, after I go through the presentation and after you've had an opportunity to look through the application and the info pack, if you think this is of interest to you, I think the most important thing I could tell you is just get started on your application. They're due by August 10th, which I know is still a full month plus away. But if you haven't looked at it already, the application is, it's fairly lengthy, I guess. There's a lot of documentation that's required. And the reasons for that is because that's what the program requires. We can't just sort of take applicants on their word about what they make in terms of eligibility. We need to see the documentation that shows that. And that's all listed in the application. The various different types of income sources and assets that are relevant, and the types of documentation that are required of applicants to demonstrate what they have in those respects. But some of it you may just say, I don't have that, it's not applicable, and then it's a quick, you check it off, you say you don't have it. But other things, if you have various income streams, if you're self-employed, if you have a bunch of different assets littered around, if there's multiple people in your family who are going to be applying for this, applying, I mean, you're all on one application, but if they're going to be intending to be part of your application, they're going to need to provide documentation. So, if you have a couple people and various income sources and assets, maybe people are between jobs, et cetera, pretty quickly it can become a lot to kind of cobble together in that time frame. And you don't want to wait till the very last minute, because the vast majority of people don't submit a 100% complete application on the first try. The good news is if you don't submit a 100% complete application, we'll let you know within a matter of about 2 or 3 days, depending on how busy we are. If there's something missing, we'll type it out in neat bullet points saying, here's what we need. We need an explanation of this, or you forgot to submit this documentation. So, I wouldn't say give us something that's grossly incomplete if there's all kinds of stuff missing. But by the same token, if it's 80% complete or something, and you're just trying to gather the last couple pieces of documents, maybe you submit it a little early and it's going to come back, but at least that way you kind of get the ball rolling. And sometimes some of the things you submit may raise other questions. Maybe there's deposits in a bank account that need further explanation. So point is just don't wait till the end, because like I said, it's pretty hard to submit a totally complete application on the first try, and you don't want to be bumping up right against that deadline and then scrambling at the last minute to get anything that might be outstanding. All right, so let me just kind of go more global here for a second and talk about what is this. So Modera Marshfield, there are many different affordable housing programs. This is just one of them. This is the 40B program. That's just sort of named after the statute that is sort of the enabling statute that developers can use to build affordable units in various cities and towns throughout the state. And in this program, essentially what it means is that the units are going to be rented at levels significantly below what they would be rented on the market rate. And applicants need to be eligible. And to be eligible, you have to meet certain income and asset requirements, which we'll talk about soon. So just to give you kind of a quick sense, this is a big development. There are 62 affordable units being made available through this application process. I can say with almost 100% certainty that if you get an application, I don't want to say 100%, but if you get an application in and you're eligible for the lottery, I can almost guarantee you that there will be a unit available. Now, a unit available is slightly different than a guarantee of a unit, which we'll talk more about later, because there are other, there's still some other steps in the process. But point is, if you get an application in on time and we deem you eligible for the lottery, there's a very, very, very good chance that there will be a unit, and you will have an opportunity to move on to the next step of applying for a unit with the leasing office. We are not the management team, SEB Housing. We're not the leasing office. We are the affordable housing consultant. And our main role through this is to conduct a lottery and a marketing process that's fair and transparent, and to evaluate all applicants for program eligibility. And I'll talk a little bit later about the differences between program eligibility and lease eligibility. But just kind of going back to where I was a moment ago, so this is just one affordable housing program. You will have to meet certain requirements to be eligible. The rents, so you have 16 one-bedroom units with one bathroom. Rents for those are $1,573 per month. There are 35 two-bedroom units. Those have two bathrooms. Those will be renting for $1,867 per month, and 11 three-bedroom units. Those will be renting for $2,135 per month. Now, these rents are not tied to any specific applicant's financial picture. Okay, they are set each year, depending on numbers published by the federal government. They usually go up a little bit each year. Sometimes they stay the same, sometimes they go down. But the important thing to kind of keep in mind as an applicant is those are the rents, you're expected to be able to pay those on the strength of your own income and assets. They don't fluctuate, depending on your specific financial picture. Some of those units will be built out for persons with mobility impairments and sensory impairments. So, 4 of the 1-bedroom units are built out for persons with mobility impairments, and 3 are built out for persons with or have features for persons who have audio or visual impairments. For the 2-bedroom units, 2 of those have features for the people with mobility impairments, and 2 for folks with audio visual impairments, and 2 of the 3-bedroom units are built out for persons with mobility impairments. So if one of those applies to you, then when you fill out your lottery application, just make sure to indicate the need for one of those so that you get priority for one of those. Going back to the rents for a second, I said they're not tied to any specific applicant financial picture. Additionally, those rents do not include utilities. So the utilities that tenants will be responsible for paying are gas, which is heat, cooking, and hot water, electricity, and water. That being said, there is free surface parking included in your rent. Okay, so what are the kind of general program requirements? I'm going to kind of go through the quick bullet points, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into each. But as I already mentioned, to be eligible, you have to be under certain income limits, which we'll talk about, and we also have to take a look at your assets. The monitoring agent for this property has a rule that says that households who only have 1 person in them can't live in 2-bedroom units, and households that only have 2 people can't live in 3-bedroom units unless required as a reasonable accommodation. So what that means for you is if you're a single person applying for this, unless you have a reasonable accommodation, then unfortunately the only unit size that you would be eligible to apply for is a 1-bedroom unit. Similarly, if you're a 2-person household and you don't have a need for a 3rd bedroom to accommodate some disability, you could only apply and qualify for a 2-bedroom unit, not a 3-bedroom unit. You can do a 1-bedroom unit, but you can't do that bigger sized unit with an additional bedroom. If any household owns a home, you can't own a home at the time that you sign a lease. So it's okay if you own a home now. It's okay if you own a home still at the lottery date. But if you move on to the next steps in this process and you're lease eligible and your time comes up to sign a lease, if you still own that home, that's going to be a bar to you to signing the lease. So if that applies, you'll have to start thinking about whether you want to make arrangements to sell that home. I wouldn't tell anyone to go ahead now. You probably want to see what happens with your lottery application and maybe even the lottery. And you'll have some time after the lottery to kind of probably get a sense of how much time you have to sell the home. There's 62 affordable units. They're not all going to be ready at exactly the same time. So you may have some option to reserve a unit that won't be ready until later on. And you may want to choose that and give yourself some time to sell the home. We'll talk more about unit selection after the lottery in a bit. Finally, just sort of the other 4th main requirement to eligibility in this program is you can't have a financial interest or a relationship to the developer, the development, the management team. So I don't think this often comes up. It does come up sometimes. We've had households who live in a development and then they want to start working for the development. For better or worse, that's not allowed. That's considered a relationship with the management team. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into that sort of first bullet point that I talked about and have mentioned a couple times now, which is to be eligible for this program. Like I said, the rents are less than what they would be on the market. But the requirement to be eligible is you have to have income that meets the income ceilings determined by the program. Those are, for a household size of 1, $67,400. Household size of 2, $77,000. Household size of 3, $86,650. Household size of 4 is $96,250. Household size of 5, $103,950. And a household size of 6 is $111,650. Don't have to write that down. Don't have to memorize it. It's littered throughout the materials. It's right on the first page of the application. It's in multiple places in the information packet. So don't worry if you didn't just memorize that. Just check out the materials. Like I said, they're online on our website, www.scbhousing.com. Or if you want us to just mail them or email them directly to you, reach out to us. We can do that. But again, those are the income limits, okay? Income is everyone in the household, with the exclusion of dependents under the age of 18 and full-time students who are dependents. The most that we would count for them is $480, kind of a random number, but if you have a 20-year-old kid who's a full-time college student who's got a job and they make $5,000 a year or $10,000 or $50,000, whatever it is, if they meet that definition, all we would count is $480. So it doesn't matter that they might make a whole lot more than that. But everyone else, if they don't meet those two exceptions, we are counting their income towards the income limits for the household size. And income is defined pretty broadly in the program. When you fill out the application, you'll see there's a whole income table, and we run through all these various sources of income. Those sources of income you'll see are broader than what many people oftentimes think of when they think of income, which is just, what do I make at my job, my main job? What's my, biweekly pay? Well, that's certainly kind of maybe most people's main source of income, but other people have other sources of income too. So especially in today's economy, a lot of people have second jobs. They work in the gig economy, maybe not as much right now because of the pandemic, but people are driving Uber and Lyft, or they have side jobs, of various natures. That counts as income, okay? Or if you're getting child support or alimony, that counts as income. If you're getting Social Security, that counts as income. If you have a pension that's distributing regularly, that is income. Unemployment or workman's compensation, that's all income. If you're getting periodic payments from a friend or family member, maybe a mom or dad or an uncle is giving you money each month to help with groceries, whatever it may be. That's great. If that's a regular thing that you get every month, chances are we have to count that as income. If it's only once or, very kind of infrequent, we might be able to not categorize it as income. But if this is a frequent source, we're probably going to have to count that as income. So look through all those categories on the application, spend some time with it, try to make sure you don't overlook anything, and let us know what all your different income sources are, and we'll count it up and apply it against the income limits. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. Other times, income can be a little bit harder to kind of determine. It's very sort of individually applicant based. If you've had the same steady job for last 5 years and it's, pretty easy to track what you've been making, then it's usually a pretty easy projection to say, here's what they've made for the last 8 months. That's what we're going to project going forward. Other people don't have as much stability. They've changed jobs. Maybe they were getting some unemployment in there. Those can be a little bit trickier to try and project. Well, what is this likely to be over the next 12 months? Meanwhile, over the past 6 months, it's been various different things. And then there's everything in between. But you don't need to necessarily get too bogged down in that. We'll work through it with you. We have a team of application processors who will work through it with you and see what you've kind of been making recently, and use that to make a determination of what you are likely to make over the next 12 months. And that's what we're applying towards that income limit. That's a fairly rigorous analysis that we have to do because that's mandated by the program, right? And so if we're saying that you're under the income limit, and it turns out we've missed something that's doesn't reflect so well on us. If a monitor comes in and says, "Hey, you said this household made 63,000, but they make 78,000, and they shouldn't have qualified." So I say that by way of giving you some background. We're not trying to make this process difficult for anyone. In fact, we're trying to make it as easy as we can. But there are guidelines that we have to follow, and other supervising authorities that want to make sure that the program requirements are met. And so we want to make sure that when they come and if they do an audit or start looking at things, that we've kind of checked all the boxes that we need to check. And no one can say, that an applicant was allowed to move forward when they should not have been. So if it seems like we're asking for a lot, please just keep that in mind. So you've got your income cap, and that's required by the program. As I mentioned sort of early on in this program, the rents are the rents, and they're not tied to your specific income and asset picture. And you are required, the expectation requirement is that applicants will be able to support the rent on the strength of their own income and assets. So, according to the program, there's no real minimum income, right? Technically, someone could make no money, and the program would say they're under the income limits. They're program eligible. But if you made no money and you had no savings or very little savings, you're not going to be able to support the rent. So even if you were program eligible, at the end of the day, when you go to apply for a lease, the leasing office would say, "Hey, I'm really sorry. There's no way you can support these rents. We can't qualify you for a lease." So with that in mind, for the benefit of everyone, for you, for the property, and not to sort of give anyone false hope, we take a more cursory review of your income and assets to make sure, or not make sure, but just to see if it appears that you will be able to meet the leasing office's minimum income criteria that they will apply when you go to apply for a lease after the lottery. The criteria that they use is 2.5 times the income. Sorry, you should have 2.5 times the rent in income. So what that translates to over the course of a year is, for a one-bedroom unit, it's expected that you make about $47,000. For a two-bedroom unit, about $56,000, and for a three-bedroom unit, $64,000. If you have a voucher, Section 8 voucher, some other mobile housing, make sure it's mobile subsidy. Disregard that. It doesn't apply. Also, I lost my train of thought there for a second. But we will also look at your assets. Okay, so it's really a minimum income and assets analysis. So what that means is, just going back for a sec, if I just said the sort of expectation for a one bedroom is that you'd make about $47,000 to demonstrate that you'll be able to cover the rent when the time comes to it. If you only make $20,000 a year or something, but you have a ton in assets that you can draw down from, and from our perspective, SEB, we'd probably say, "Hey, that's fine with us," and probably it's going to be fine with the leasing office, but we're not going to reject you on that basis because it looks close enough for us. Again, this isn't even a program requirement, and the last thing we want to do is reject someone who may very well meet the leasing office's lease screening criteria. So again, this is a much less rigorous analysis than the income ceiling, the program ceiling that I talked about a moment ago. And if you're generally close, we'll say that's fine with us. It's something to keep in mind because, again, you will have to apply for a lease and meet the leasing office's screening criteria. Okay, so if we enter you into the lottery, that is not sort of a guarantee by any means that we've deemed you eligible for a lease for the reasons that it's a less rigorous screening and other reasons too. We're not asking for background checks or credit history or any of those things. Okay, so I'll talk about that again in a little bit, but entry into the lottery would mean you are eligible for the program. It is not a indication that you are necessarily eligible for a lease. That happens, applying for a lease is something you do after the lottery. Okay. Assets, like income, are defined broadly by the program. You'll see in the program application, there are a lot of different categories of assets that you have to kind of go through and list what you have. The thing about assets is there's no asset cap. So it's different from income in that regard. We're not looking at any ceiling to say, are you over that? And if so, that would disqualify you from the program. So there's really no kind of benefit to sort of trying to undervalue or not report assets. The one thing I will say about assets, the sort of relevant piece about assets in this program is that the income from your assets gets added to your income total. So if you have assets that do produce income, and many assets do, we have to look at that, and we have to then add that income to your income total to see if you still are under the income limits. I would say for most people, most applicants, not all, but for most applicants, I would say this isn't, the income generated from their assets usually isn't going to be enough to bump them up over the income limits. But if you have a lot tucked away in assets and they're doing very well for you, it might be, especially if you're already bumping up against the income limits. The other kind of big thing about assets is, like I said earlier on, you can't own a home at the time you go to sign a lease. We're not particularly concerned about personal assets, jewelry, and things like that. So you're not going to, cars, the value of those types of assets. So you won't see that asked about in the application. If you have a retirement fund or 401k or something, even if you're not accessing it, we still have to count that as an asset. But again, there's no asset limit. So even if you have a lot in there, that's probably not going to, impact your application. Sometimes people want to have a co-signer or a guarantor on their lease. Something to keep in mind, that's strictly prohibited by the program. So if that's something you were kind of considering, please be mindful of that there really isn't any wiggle room on that. That is just not allowed in the program. Excuse me for a sec. Okay, when you fill out your application, one of the very first questions on page, or I guess on the fourth page of the application, right at the top, it's going to ask you to indicate what household type you are. There are only 3 household types that you can be. You can be a household type 1, a household type 2, or a household type 3. And we give examples of each. It's pretty straightforward. So I won't list through all of them because you can just read it in the materials. It's in both the application and the info pack. But, just for example, if you're a 6-person household or a 5-person household, you're going to be a type 3 household every time. If you're a 1-person household, you're going to be a type 1 household every time. Type 2 households aren't quite as easy because those can kind of go both ways. But just as an example, a 3-person household, which consists of, let's say, 2 heads of household plus 1 member. So let's just say mom and dad and a kid would be a type 2 household. Now you might be asking, what's a type 1, what's a type 2, and what's a type 3? Generally what that means is it corresponds to the number of bedrooms that the program would say that household type needs. So according to the program, a household type 3 would need 3 bedrooms, a household type 2 would need 2 bedrooms, and a household type 1 would need 1 bedroom. And for some of those, that's, pretty clear. A 6-person household is going to need 3 bedrooms. 2 is not going to be sufficient. A one-person household really only needs one bedroom. They might like a second bedroom, but they don't need it. Two heads of household that are in a stable relationship, that are a couple, they only need one bedroom. They might like a second bedroom, but they don't need it. When we talk about the lottery a little bit later on, I'll talk about the relevance of those types. But it is important to indicate your household type accurately on your application, because when we do the lottery, this could impact the order that you're put in on the waiting list, which then impacts the order you get to move forward and select a unit. So we'll talk about the lottery in a moment, but suffice it now to say, when you fill out your application, take a moment to read through the different household types, understand generally that the type corresponds to the number of bedrooms that the program says you need, and also understand that getting it right is important for your own benefit, so that you don't end up sort of disadvantaging yourself by not giving yourself a priority for a bigger unit. By that I mean, if you're really a type 3 household and you say you're a type 2 household, you could disadvantage yourself on the 3-bedroom unit if that's what you're applying for. Again, I'll talk more about that in a bit, but just fill out the household type accurately for your own benefit. Okay, and if you have questions, call us, but it's mostly should be fairly self-explanatory. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, the program does have some restrictions around smaller households living in bigger units. We don't love it, but we don't control it. So just keep in mind, if you're a household of 2 persons, you're probably going to be prohibited from living in a 3-bedroom unit unless you need it as a accommodation. And similarly, a household of 1 person is probably going to be prohibited from living in a 2-bedroom unit. So when you get your application in, like I said earlier, there'll be a little bit of back and forth about, or I should say within a couple of days, we'll get back to you with a response on the status of your application. If there's anything missing, we'll list exactly what that is. If you're ineligible, we'll let you know. If you disagree, you can let us know. If you're eligible, we'll send you a lottery application number, okay? That number will be in the form of A. blank, blank, blank. So let's just say you are the first household to submit an application that is complete, and the first household who we deem eligible. We're just going to go in order. So if you're the first, you're going to be lottery application number A.001. And if you're the second, you're going to be lottery application number A.002. And the purpose of those numbers is for no other reason than to keep your information, name, anonymous when we do the lottery. It has no bearing on kind of placement or status or anything like that. So please don't be fooled if you have A.001. Please don't think, oh, I won or I'm number 1, because that's not what it means. It's just your anonymous identification number. Okay. The deadline for applying for the program, August 10th. Again, get your applications in early. The lottery will be held on August 20th. And we'll be doing it via this live stream just like this and via phone call. On the night of the lottery, you're welcome to tune in as you are here. You don't have to. If you don't, you'll get the results at the same time as everyone else. There will be 2 drawings, okay? And the way it's going to work is there will be a local preference drawing and a general drawing. What is local preference, you might ask? Okay, so in this lottery, there is going to be a preference for households who are local. And a local household is a household who lives in Marshfield, who works in Marshfield or for the town of Marshfield, or who has a kid attending the Marshfield schools. Those are the only categories of preference. If you meet one of those, there will be a question. There's a question on the application that asks it, so make sure to check it off if you meet it. Conversely, if you don't meet it, please don't say that you do. Like I said, there's a lot of units available, so even while a local preference can give some local households advantage for some of the units relative to other households who don't qualify, even if you don't qualify, there are enough units that I can almost, I can say with a lot of confidence that if you're in the lottery, there's probably going to be a unit for you. So there will be two drawings, a local preference drawing and a general drawing. We'll do the local preference drawing first. I'll put all the application numbers in a box of households who indicated that they qualified for local preference, and I'll draw those out and I'll call them as I go. After we complete that, I'll put those back in with every other household. So now we'll have every household who is eligible for the lottery, put the numbers back in the box, and draw them out, and we'll call it as we go. After I draw those, households always want to ask, who wins, who loses. If I'm the first household drawn, that must mean I'm a winner. If I'm the second household drawn, that means I'm runner-up. And if I'm the third household drawn, I'm the, whatever you call it in horse racing, place I can't remember. But the point is, no, that's not how it necessarily works. Okay, so being drawn earlier is certainly better than being drawn later, but there's these required sorting that we have to do after the lottery that prioritize households according to certain criteria, and those include the household type, which we talked about a little bit ago, whether they qualify for local preference, whether they need a disabled unit or whether they need a unit for persons who are audio or visually impaired. So there's a number of these different priorities that we have to factor in that can then sort of reshuffle the exact order that the numbers were drawn. So what do I mean by that? I'm just going to give you some examples. These are by no means exhaustive, but there will be multiple waiting lists generated by the lottery. I will send you the waiting list the night of the lottery, and the waiting lists are the order, top to bottom, that households will get to move forward in step 2, just to apply for a lease. Okay, so if you tune in on the night of the lottery, and you watch as I draw the numbers out, that gives you some of the picture. It doesn't give you the complete picture because I still need to take those and then do the sort according to these different preferences. And then I'll create the waiting list, and I will send those to you the night of the lottery. The waiting list will actually, like I said, be ordered top to bottom in order of priority. So those are what will tell you kind of exactly where you are and exactly when you can expect to kind of move forward relative to other households in step 2, which is to apply for a lease. And there will be multiple waiting lists, and every household who's in the lottery will have a position on one or multiple waiting lists, depending on how many unit types they applied and were eligible for. So when you fill out your application, it's going to ask you what unit size are you applying for, a 1-bedroom unit, a 2-bedroom unit, or a 3-bedroom unit. And you can list any of those. And in fact, it is beneficial to you to list as many of those as you think you might possibly be interested in, because there's no downside to listing multiple. It doesn't disadvantage you in any way. It doesn't have any sort of impact on your position on a different waiting list. And we'll evaluate you. You may be eligible for one type of unit but not another, or maybe you'll be eligible for all of them. But you could disadvantage yourself if you don't apply for a unit size and then later on decide, oh, that was a mistake. I wish I had applied for a 3-bedroom, and you didn't, because it may be too late. Certainly by the time we run the lottery, it's too late to kind of change that. So if I can give you a piece of advice, when you fill out your application, be over-inclusive. There's no disadvantage. Fill out every unit type you think you could be interested in. If you're eligible, if you list that you're interested in a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom unit, and you're eligible for a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom unit, we will let you know. And when we do the lottery sorting, you'll have a position on both of those waiting lists. Okay. If you're only eligible for a 2-bedroom unit, you'll only be on one of the 2-bedroom waiting lists, and so on and so forth. But the point is, every lottery household has a position on at least one and possibly multiple waiting lists, which, as I said, dictate when we put those waiting lists together, those will be in the order that households get to move forward to the next step. I want to take a specific example. So for the 3-bedroom waiting list, I want to just kind of give you an idea of how this priorities can play out. So there will be 9 3-bedroom apartments that are set aside for local preference. Type 3 local preference households will be the top households on that list. Type 3 households who are not local preference will be second. Type 2 households who are local preference will have the 3rd tier of priority, and type 2 households who are not local preference will have the 4th tier of priority. So what does that mean? If a type 2 household applies for and is eligible for a 3-bedroom unit and they're picked first in the lottery, they're still going to get leapfrogged by every type 3 household. Okay, and this is always a hard kind of concept. People see their number drawn early and they get excited and they think I'm number 1, but you have to keep in mind these different sorting priorities that are required by the program. So you really don't know exactly where you are on the waiting list until I send them to you the night of the lottery after it's done. And there's going to be multiple waiting lists, so I won't go through all the different kind of ways they'll be sorted. If you're interested, you can read the information packet on page 12, which lists all the different waiting lists there will be and how they'll be sorted. But it's worth just kind of going through it now because it is different than your sort of typical lottery drawing, which is just, the first household drawn is number 1 and they're the winner, and that's kind of it. Or it just, if there are multiple numbers drawn, they just stay in order, of how they were chronologically drawn in the lottery. In this, there's kind of this added layer of sorting that we have to do. And so, again, every type 3 household is going to be above every type 2 household on the 3-bedroom waiting list. Independent, it doesn't matter if the type 2 household was drawn first or before them in the lottery. But conversely, type 2 and type 3 households have the same priority for a 2-bedroom unit. And so there, the type 2 household who's drawn before the type 3 household would be above them on the waiting list. If you are after the lottery, I'll send you the waiting lists. I'll send you leasing office contact information. We'll send your information to the leasing office. We'll send all your contact information that you've shared with us, and we'll send them the waiting lists in order. And then you will move into the second phase in this process, which is to apply for a lease with the leasing office. So we'll kind of hand you off to the leasing office in order of the waiting list, and then you can engage with them on applying for a lease. Again, a lease application is different. There's different criteria than what we've been looking at, which again is mostly geared around what's your income, what is your assets. But we're not, as I said before, we're not looking at your credit. We're not looking about whether you have, some criminal background that might disqualify you. We're not asking about landlord references or rental history or any of that stuff. And in addition, the minimum income and asset screening we do is kind of approximate, but we're not making the sort of final call in that regard. So we'll pass you off, you engage with them, and then you can apply for a lease. One of the beauties of this program, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, is that all of the affordable units have been pre-approved, so they're kind of representative of the units in general in the development, and they're indistinguishable from the market rate units from the exterior. So someone walking through wouldn't be able to distinguish an affordable unit from a market rate unit, and they're also kind of interspersed throughout the development in different locations, kind of proportionally. So it's not as if all the affordable units are, sort of in one corner or all stacked in one place, sort of segregated. That's not how this works at all. So that's a nice kind of feature of the program. When you go to this second step in the process and apply for a lease, you will be able to pick from any of the affordable units that are then available. Okay, so just for example, like I just mentioned, this 3-bedroom waiting list, there will be 9 3-bedroom apartments that have this local preference attached. If you're the first person on that waiting list, when you go to apply for a lease, you'll get to pick from any of the 3-bedroom units that are available. And it doesn't matter if they're available right then, in a month from then, in 2, 3, 4 months from then. So you'll have some choice, which is great because, maybe you're in the middle of a current lease and it doesn't end for a month or 2, and you need some time to finish out your current lease before you can move into a unit. So you'll get to select from any of the units then available, assuming you've demonstrated that you're eligible for a lease. You would then, reserve the unit. Once you've done that, then the household behind you can select from any of the units that are remaining. And once they've done that, then the household behind them can select from, any still available units, and so on and so forth until the units are all reserved. It's maybe important to note that you'll probably have some deadlines given to you about how quickly you're expected to come in and apply for a lease and reserve a unit, and that's out of fairness to the people who are behind you who want to reserve a unit. But there are also going to be households who start hearing about this opportunity who maybe weren't in the lottery, who want to get on the waiting list. They'll be behind everyone who was in the lottery. But the point is, when the leasing office contacts you, they'll very likely say, you got a week to come in and apply for a lease, and we'll show you the different units and floor plans and photos. And, at that point, I don't know if they'll be offering tours, probably not, given COVID. It may be a virtual tour. I know properties are getting pretty sophisticated with those, but they'll give you kind of a sense of what the options are. But you'll just want to kind of pay attention to any time limits that they give, so you don't lose out on your place. As long as you move into a unit within 6 months of the lottery, you're fine. You don't have to go through another review. If you happen to be selecting a unit that may not be ready for 6+ months, you may have to update your file with us, which sometimes elicits a groan from applicants. The update is not nearly, not going to be as sort of intensive as the initial submission, but it's just something to keep in mind. If you reserve unit 201 and that's going to be ready in 8 months, and that's when you're going to move in, well, then the screening that we did, potentially 9 months before then may have grown stale, and maybe your circumstances have really changed. So we need to do an update with you just to see what's going on and make sure you're still eligible for the program. Now, if you end up moving in, that's great. Every year you have to recertify. That's maybe not so great. But the good news is that usually recertifying each year is easier than the initial certification because you have some experience, you've done it before, and you kind of know what's expected and what's required. The other thing is there's this really nice income cushion that's built in where current tenants who have already qualified for the program and who are living in a unit can make 140% more than what they could make to initially be eligible for the program. So what does that mean in actual numbers? If you're a one-person household applying today, you can make up to $67,400. Anything more than that, you'd make too much and you wouldn't be eligible for the program. But that same one-person household in a year from now if they want to continue living at Modera Marshfield, and they are recertifying, showing that they're still eligible, that person can now make up to $94,360. So almost a $30,000 bump. And so what that means is if things are going well at work and boss wants to give you a little pay raise, then provided it's not a really substantial one, it's hopefully not going to bump you up over that recertification income limit. As I indicated at the beginning too, rents. So rents, those are tied to numbers that the federal government puts out, not your specific financial picture. And the federal government puts those numbers out once a year. So what does that mean? It means rents usually change each year. You would be advised beforehand what any new rents would be. They usually go up, not by a drastic amount. They go up if the area median incomes go up, meaning households can make more money and still be eligible for this program. But they may go up $40, $50, $60, maybe not. Sometimes they go down, sometimes they kind of hold the same. But point is, the rent that you see today is not necessarily going to be the rent that will be applicable in a year from now or the year after that. So there's some fluctuation built in that way. If you at some point you can, if people have property specific questions, we can put you in touch with the property about those. But I can tell you just what I've been told. I haven't been to the property, and like I said, we're not the developer or the property management group. But just based on what they've told us, is the unit interiors have custom cabinetry, stainless steel appliances. The flooring is like a wood plank style flooring. There are stone countertops in the kitchens. Closets are walk-in, washers and dryers in the units. There are also a number of different community amenities. There's a clubhouse. You can get package reception. There's a state-of-the-art fitness facility, resort-style pool, outdoor fireplace, outdoor kitchen. There's seating areas and a playground. So brand new community, brand new amenities, all kind of very high end. This is, big development company, and they put out very nice products. And I think this will be one of them. Great opportunity to live in this community at rents that are, substantially below what they are on the market. So that's kind of the major kind of salient points in this process. Again, two-step process. Step one, submit your program application to SCB Housing. Don't wait till the 11th hour to do it. If you're eligible, get a lottery application number. We'll enter you into the lottery. We'll create the waiting list, pass you over to the leasing office. The waiting list will be in order. There'll be multiple of them. Every household will be on a waiting list. And at that point, you can engage with the leasing office in applying for a lease and selecting from one of the available units. Does anyone have any questions? If you don't have, if there's something that you forgot to think of or which comes up later, you can always reach out to us. Our information is in the materials, but I'll just say it in case. Our phone number is 617-782-6900, extension 1. If we don't pick up, leave a message. Please leave a message with your name and contact information. If you don't leave a message, we won't know that you called. Or you can email us, which is our preferred method of communicating. So if you have email and you're comfortable with it, please shoot us an email, info@sebhousing.com. We'll get back to you quickly with a response. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll hang out for just a minute to see if anyone has any questions, but if not, wish you the best of luck with your application. We hope to see it come in. And hope you have a great evening, and thanks for tuning in to this information session for Modera Marshfield. Oh, yep, sorry, let me turn you up here.
Okay, this is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi. I just had a question. My son has a Section 8 housing voucher.
Yep.
In Brookline.
Oh, he lives in Brookline?
How does that, he lives in Brookline.
Yep.
I live in Marshfield.
Okay.
I'm looking to get him closer. He's disabled.
Okay.
So how does that work? Does he apply for a lottery with a voucher even though he has a voucher, or is the voucher or the lottery not one? We can't have both.
Okay, sure. I'm going to just repeat it in case. So for any households that are on YouTube, if you didn't hear, the question is about, applying with a voucher. And so, yes, you can apply with a voucher. You want to make sure that the voucher is mobile. There are different types of vouchers. Some vouchers are project based, but you want to make sure the voucher is mobile. You can absolutely apply with a voucher. Really, the biggest point with vouchers is you need to check with the authority who issues it to make sure that the rents at the property are within the rents that they'll approve. Okay, because different housing authorities have different amounts of funds, and they have different kind of thresholds for what they consider appropriate for one of their holders. Rents, what they would consider to be an appropriate rent for one of their voucher holders to be paying, right? So kind of common sense that a voucher isn't a license to go rent a $10,000 apartment. So yeah, you can absolutely apply with a voucher. We won't, as I said, we won't screen a voucher holder out for any minimum income analysis. We'll just we skip over that step. Chances are, if they have a voucher, they're probably under the income limit. We may be able to work with the voucher issuing authority to make the application process a little bit easier. And I think the biggest thing is just what I said, is the rent within what the voucher issuing authority is willing to pay. And so, the rents are listed in the information packet. So you might just, you might go to the housing authority and say, hey, my son is considering applying for this. Here's the unit, number of bedrooms that he'll probably apply for. This is the rent. Is this within, what the housing authority would approve?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's less money though. Brookline won't pay 15, I don't think. I'd have to go back to the housing authority and find out. But if he goes in the lottery and gets the lottery, does he lose his voucher, or is he at least under the voucher?
No. He doesn't lose his voucher. They're totally. I mean, the lottery and the voucher are separate things, right? So his applying for the lottery, to my knowledge, would have no impact on his voucher.
But he wouldn't be utilizing the voucher if he won the lottery. He would be under the lottery rules, right? He wouldn't be under. There wouldn't be. The voucher, right?
The question is about. Sorry, I just want to make sure I keep anyone on YouTube linked in. So the question is about kind of if he won the lottery and could he lose the voucher. Well, okay, first thing I say is nobody wins the lottery, right? Everyone gets entered, everyone gets a spot on the waiting list. If he were to then end up renting a unit here, he would probably want to use his voucher. If somehow he could rent a unit without using the voucher, then I would assume the housing authority would have something to say about that. I mean, he wouldn't be living in Brookline anymore. So he wouldn't have that other unit, right?
No.
So I think the short answer to your question is, to my knowledge, there would be there should be no impact on his voucher just by applying. He can apply for the lottery, but the real question for him is, if the housing authority says, well, we will not pay these rents, they're too high, then this may ultimately be an exercise that is wasteful of his time, right? Because if at the end of the day, the voucher issuing authority says we're not paying that, then he's just gone through this whole process of applying, getting in the lottery, applying for a lease, touring units, etc. And then the housing authority says, sorry, we're not going to support that. And then he can't likely rent a unit there.
But what if he's eligible, because he does have a significant other that has a part-time, he can only really work part-time. They may be eligible just under what the rents are, that would mean you could giving the voucher up.
So the question just again is, he is a partner who may be able to support it, and what if they kind of are eligible based on the strength of the partner's income, assets, kind of what would happen then? And I think the answer to that is, well, that's a good question. I guess I don't know exactly what would happen with his voucher. I don't know if the housing authority would say, if you're not actively using the voucher, then it lapses. That's probably a question to ask them. Okay. I don't know if it would just me. That's a good question. I don't know what happens if you have a voucher and then you are able to, rent a different place and not use the voucher. I don't know if you lose it or if it's just sort of temporarily inactive but can be reactivated. But I think that would be a question for the housing authority to say, hey, what would happen in this scenario?
Yeah. Well, see, the only thing is my concern is if you move in and then he breaks up with this person and they leave, then you would not be able to afford the rent there if Brookline says forget it, you're not using the voucher.
Right.
You haven't used it in years, and now it's done because they're not even giving vouchers out anymore. So,
right. Yeah,
I don't want to put in it.
I wish I knew the answer to that, and I don't. I think that's probably a question for someone at the Brookline Housing Authority to say, hey, he's interested in this other opportunity. Can you take me through the steps here of what could happen if he ends up, leasing another unit and not using the voucher? I mean, I suppose the first question would be, could he use the voucher here? I mean, the other part of that is I think, the partner would need to be listed on the voucher. So that could be another kind of step. Yeah. So, but I do think you probably need to have a conversation with them about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Was there anyone on watching via YouTube that had a question? Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you have a great evening, and we hope to see your applications soon. So have a good night. Thanks, Susan.
You too. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.